morning, everyone. Happy New Year. And hopefully most of you are safe and or not too sick. I'm pretty sure that some of you may be having COVID currently, and thank you for connecting if that's the case. Claude won't be there this morning, so I'm just going to say thank you in my capacity in the EXCO of the French Association. Thank you to BCG for having the masterclass, and for this morning we're going to switch role with Marie, and Marie is going to be our facilitator. So Marie, the floor is yours.
So just before we start, a few logistic points. This is a session for you. Some of you have seen them in the previous session, so this is really for you. We wish that you have a great session, and for that, please turn your microphone off. There would be a chat where we can take your questions as we go and as we are having this master class. I will shortly introduce the speakers, and we will have 40 minutes of questions with them, where I would also be able to take some of your questions in the chat, and then we would divide in subgroups to have closer discussions among us, and we'll regroup after that to share some closing remarks. So thank you, Fanny, and good morning again, all. It's really a pleasure for me to be here with you. Thank you for the INSEAD Alumni Association for inviting us and partnering us on these master classes. It's the second master class of season 2. It's like a series now. It's year 2, session 2, and we will talk about creativity. In this era of technological upheaval, climate crisis, and sustainability urgency, most of the leaders agree that creativity in business is crucial for success. But leaders also would say that they struggle to cultivate this capability in their organization. So let's explore how systematically to harness imagination to generate new ideas and transform our businesses. I'm Marie Humblot-Ferrero. I'm a managing director and partner at BCG. And since I've joined BCG, I've developed 2 passions, biopharma and people. I lead transformations since a few years now, developing new strategies, developing digital transformations, and I've come to learn that to do that, focusing on people and putting people at the center is crucial. I'm delighted to have with us today a superb panel of speakers. Let me start with Spencer. So warm welcome to you, Spencer Harrison. Spencer is an associate professor of organizational behavior at INSEAD. His award-winning research has been published in top scientific journals, in addition to Harvard Business Review, and mentioned in Fast Company, Money, and INC magazines. He's a TED speaker, a co-founder of the Creative Collaboratorium, the world's largest working group of creativity researchers, and founder of Curiosity at Work. He helps organizations map and reinitialize their culture, develop best practices that enhance creativity and innovation, and manage to measure transformational change. Throughout his research and work, he's also worked with several companies, Google, Salesforce, Deloitte, Sanfos, Atos, Cargill, Schneider Electric, just to mention a few. Thank you, Spencer, to be with us today. Let me also warmly welcome Aymeric Grange. Aymeric is the founder and CEO of 900.care, a French brand of refillable and natural personal care products, whose mission is to put an end to single-use plastic in the hygiene and beauty industry. This brand was launched in December 2020, and it has already prevented more than 100,000 plastic bottles from being discarded. Before starting 900.care, Aymeric Grange spent 6 years at BCG in Paris and in New York, where he specialized in marketing, sales, and pricing topics. And last but not least, Fanny Potier, 2001 the INSEAD MBA, partner and associate director at BCG, partner in crime to lead these leadership masterclasses since a few years. Fanny has indeed long experience in people and leadership strategy. She's convinced that the human factor is at the heart of innovative, agile, and sustainable organization. She supports companies in their strategic transformation, placing their people at the center. She's also been working with artists and creatives for more than 20 years, bridging the rational and the emotional and intuitive at work. She's an artist herself and practices sculpture and clay. So thank you all, and let's start this discussion. Let's start with you, Fanny, if you like. It said that creativity lies in the right brain and that the left brain is the place for rationality. Is there really a difference?
First of all, I'm very happy to be there as a panelist to change a little bit the roles. And first of all, let me start humbly. I'm not a neuroscientist. However, I'm quite interested in the topic of right brain, left brain, and I've done a bit of reading on it over the years. There is a fascinating myth in modern culture of people being right brain or left brained. For the ones amongst us who have been there for a while, you may remember that there were some presentation in the past where there was a pink color on the right side of the brain and a blue color on the left side of the brain. That being said, that the right side was female and the left side was male. Well, there is a grain of truth to this myth. For example, the brain really does have two hemispheres, one left and one right, and both communicate by sending signals through the corpus callosum. I'll stop with the technical words there. But according to recent research, the idea of people being left-brained or right-brained is less fixed than we thought. Through numerous practical research, and I won't go into detail because some of them are actually pretty awful, society was told that the left brain is the analytical, logical, verbal half, while the right brain is the creative, emotional, visual, and spatial half. In truth, people are rarely so dichotomous, that is to say, thinking versus feeling. A scientist can be sad when his cat dies. Similarly, a singer or a painter may be a very shrewd businessman or businesswoman. And the world is actually not neither or. There is a truth to the idea that some brain functions reside more on one side of the brain than the other, but for more individual personality traits such as creativity or a tendency towards the rational rather than the intuitive, there has been little or no evidence supporting a residence in one area of the brain. Almost every feat of creativity and logic carries the mark of the whole brain functioning as a whole. If you leverage other pieces of research, and particularly a very good book on that, which is called The Master and the Emissary, the left hemisphere, which underwrites the fragmented vision, is both literally more limited in what it can see and less capable of understanding what it does see than the right, and is less aware of its own limitation, and we'll come back to that. In the last 50 years, we have actually created a world which contrasts with the natural world and reflects the priorities and the vision of the left hemisphere. The available sources of intuitive life have been conceptualized and devitalized. In results, the left hemisphere world has been externalized and continues to be. Both hemispheres are incompatible, but really should work together in this order. The right tends to ground the experience, and the left then works on it to clarify, unpack, and then the right produces a new whole reintegrated based on the insights gained from the work of the left hemisphere. If we want to summarize where we stand with this theory, the right hemisphere is inclusive, both and, synthetic, integrative. The left hemisphere view is exclusive, either or, analytic, and fragmentary, unaware of what it is missing. It thinks it can go alone. I'm sure it rings a bell for some of us. What's worrying, though, is that reductionism has become the norm. And this is a viewpoint that is intellectually poor and emotionally shallow. It makes us blind to what's happening and what needs to be done about it, particularly when we think about all the climate crisis and a number of things that we have already discussed during those masterclass. As a society, we are becoming more like individuals with right hemisphere deficits. And just one fact on that, about a third of all children now have difficulty carrying out tasks that depend on sustainable attention that a decade ago, virtually all children would have been able to do so easily. And I'm sure that parents in the room recognize that fact. Let me finish with a personal conviction based on my practice and observation. Well, first of all, I wish you all to be the creator of your own life and connect with your inner creativity for that. And sharing a little bit of experience there, I wish you to learn to live in the present moment, to go in nature, to create mental space and time for your creative practice. Creativity, we may call it imagination, is a muscle, as any other muscle, and only practice can help developing it. I trust some of you have already identified your creative talent, be that writing a book, playing an instrument, acting, dancing, or painting, sculpting. And if you haven't, please look and go for it and start the practice. We are creative beings, and we need to be as such in our homes, but also in our workplaces to re-enchant the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fanny. I would now turn to Spencer to also have your point of view on creativity. Having researched creativity for so long, how would you portray a creative leader? Is there a difference actually between creative and non-creative leaders?
So thank you for having me here, and it's a joy to be with all of the INSEAD community and talk about something that I'm extremely passionate about. So I think that creative leaders do some really amazing things, and to Fanny's point, I think part of what often inhibits us when we think about creativity and leadership is that there are myths that we have around who can be creative and who cannot be creative that often obscure what the actual habits and practices and actions of truly creative people look like. So for example, even at places like INSEAD or other schools, when you go to a class on creativity, people will often start with an example about Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, or somebody that's been one of these really disruptive, radically creative individuals that we can kind of point to and say, we need to adopt habits and practices that are similar to this individual. But the reality is that we do a lot of mythologizing around what creativity is. So in the English language, the word creativity was actually first used in books in 1924. And prior to that, the reason why we never talked about human beings being creative is that we had actually reserved the notion of like the only person who can create is God or deity. So this notion of being creative as a human being is actually fairly new and modern. And as a result, we're still kind of adapting our understanding of what it means to be creative while we have all of these myths that have lingered through our history as human beings. So what I like to point out is that the things that Steve Jobs and Elon Musk do are often not things that promote creativity. So for example, and I hope I'm not offending anybody here, but one of the things that we know Steve Jobs for is wearing turtlenecks. I'm not wearing a turtleneck, this is a scarf, by the way. Introducing the iPhone and the iPod, but then also being a jerk. Okay, so I don't think that that's controversial at that point. I think his biographies kind of lay that out. And as a result, what often becomes entangled is, well, listen, like sometimes creative people, they're a little bit prickly, they can be angry about things, and it's just because they're really passionate about their ideas, and you have to be passionate about your ideas and be sort of a little bit of a jerk to fight for your ideas, And that's part of being a really great creative leader. So in the last 2 years, we've actually done a study of every Hollywood director that ever left a movie due to creative differences. And creative differences is Hollywood code for this person was a jerk, or we couldn't work with them, or they were more concerned about their ideas than they were about getting along with people. And what we show is if you leave a movie due to creative differences, the 5-year effect on your career is dramatic. You end up, you have, a several $1 million decrease in your annual budget for the films that you're offered later on. You're offered fewer films. Many of these directors go out of Hollywood altogether and begin working in television. And so you have to be able to work with people and work with ideas to be a creative leader. And we'll be able to talk more about what those specific practices look like. But one of the things that I'd like us all to kind of consider is, what are the myths or the ideas I might have already accepted about who can be creative? Does this person have to be a jerk? Do they have to be super radical? And are those things true? And hopefully in our time together, we can kind of push against some of those myths and begin to talk about habits that would be more effective for creative leaders.
I think we're at the core of it, and I like the way you put it on the myths of what can be done and how to promote creativity. Let me turn to you, Aymeric, and maybe for those who are not familiar with the company, can you give a little of background information on the company and then how you use creativity in starting up 900.care?
Yes, thank you, Marie. And thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I think fostering creativity in an organization is a topic that I'm really passionate about because I'm convinced that it can have a tremendous business impact. So to answer your first question about what is 900care, so as you said, it's a brand of refillable and natural personal care products. So we're talking about shower gel, toothpaste, deodorant, and we have a very simple mission, which is ending single-use plastic in your bathroom. So how do we do that? It's very simple. The first time that you buy a product from us, you buy a beautiful, colorful, reusable bottle, which is made of recycled plastic and that you will keep for a long time. After that, you only buy the refills. You don't buy the bottle anymore. And the refills, they're all wrapped up in cardboard, so you don't throw away single-use plastic. And those refills are delivered right into your mailbox at the frequency that you choose, thanks to a convenient subscription model. So at this point, you might be wondering, okay, but like, how do you put shower gel in a cardboard box, which is a fair question. So let me explain how we do that. So one thing that you might or might not know is that when you buy a shower gel in your supermarket from a big brand, it's made up of 80 to 90% water. And when you think about that for a minute, it means that when you buy a shower gel, you're buying single-use plastic that you will throw away, and you're buying water that you already have at home, which doesn't make any sense. So what we've decided to do is that we put all the active ingredients, so the 10%, in a tiny stick. So you put the stick in your reusable bottle and you add water at home. So then you just have to wait a few hours and you'll have created a shower gel with an amazing texture, great scent, great perfume, a lot of foam, basically everything you love about shower gel, but without having to throw away the plastic bottle at the end. So that's for the context broadly and what the company is about. But to answer your second question about how creativity has been useful in starting up this company, I think it's been really important for us because basically we needed to reinvent the way personal care was designed, manufactured, and distributed to remove one of the core foundational elements from it, because this whole industry is based on single-use plastic. And thinking back on that experience of starting up this company, I think one of the most useful tools to unleash creativity was the fact that we had this very strong constraint of not having single-use plastic. And that has forced us, in a way, to come up with innovative and creative solutions to that problem. I'm just going to give you two examples of how we did that. So the first example is that if you want to get rid of single-use plastic, then obviously you need to get rid of water, because obviously water doesn't fit well with a cardboard. So you have to have the consumer add it at the end. But once you do that, one thing that's super interesting is that you realize that your refills, your products, actually take a lot less space. They become a lot lighter, and that opens up new distribution channels. So the whole product becomes much more direct to consumer friendly because it's lighter, and so it's a lot less costly to ship. And so this way we could reinvent the way the product was distributed. Historically, you have very low penetration on that category of products for e-commerce because the economics don't make sense. Because we had this very strong constraints, we had to remove water. Therefore, the product is lighter, and therefore we can be profitable with the direct-to-consumer model. The second example is the reusable packaging. Because when you think about personal care, hygiene, the packaging is basically just a way to attract the attention of the consumer on the shelf. So you have like big labels, big claims, but it's not meant to fit well in your bathroom and be a nice looking object. But because we wanted this packaging to last a long time, and because we sold it only once, and because we sold it online, we decided to remove all the marketing claims from the reusable packaging. So you have a very sleek looking packaging, which is a very distinctive object and which really helps the brand. And so that's just two examples. But I think the bigger point is that when you start off with a very strong constraint, you need creativity almost pops up by itself because you need to unleash creativity to find new angles.
Thank you, Aymeric. That's really interesting how to use and how to take out of these constraints some opportunities to push creativity. Spencer, coming back to you, we were discussing about the creativity being put forward or not by a leader, but I wanted to ask you a question around the team around that and around that leader, and whether creativity is for the leader or it's a team sport, actually.
So obviously, I think Fanny did a really good job of introducing the idea that we often kind of dichotomize creativity, like some people are creative, some people aren't creative. It's left brain, it's right brain, it's a team sport, it's an individual sport. I think one of the other myths that we have, again, is that most of the attention for a creative effort gets attributed to an individual, when very often there is a team behind them, right? So Edison invented the light bulb, but people that worked with Edison said Edison should actually be considered a collective noun, because he actually created this experimental laboratory and was able to recruit talent there. And it was through this collaborative effort that was able to produce what happened. Now, that doesn't mean that as the leader, you might not be the individual that has sort of the vision and the main idea, and then part of what you're trying to do is build a team around you to execute on it. But in either case, generally speaking, creativity tends to be more collaborative. And as a result, then there are different tactics that enable us to be more collaborative than others. So one of the things that I frequently do with, with executive groups is we'll bring them together and I'll say, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to brainstorm as many uses as you can come up with for a brick. And so then they get a whiteboard out, they start brainstorming. Typically in 5 minutes, they'll come up with 30 ideas. And they'll say, wow, like we were super productive. We came up with 30 ideas. And I say, okay, now I'm going to give you 5 minutes to generate as many ideas as you can for using a paperclip. But this time I want you to generate those ideas individually. And then at the end of the 5 minutes, we take all those individual lists, we add them all up and see how many ideas are generated. On average, they generate 2 to 3 times more ideas by working individually. So does that mean that it's better to work individually than it is as a group? No, it just means that there's different points in the creative process where you would want to leverage the group in different ways. So for instance, when we're trying to brainstorm, typically only one person gets to talk at a time. And so you might have ideas, but those ideas don't go recorded because somebody else is up the whiteboard explaining their idea. There's also, when we're brainstorming collectively, some fear that people are kind of judging what we're saying. And so as a result, we're going to hold back some of our crazier ideas. But when we're just writing them down on a piece of paper to ourselves, we can write really crazy things. For example, one of the most commonly claimed uses for a brick is as some sort of a weapon. But people are less likely to explain that use in the group. But when they write it independently, the brick as a weapon is almost always there. Which might mean that we're all a little bit more violent than we like to admit. But the point is that we need to then be thinking about what are the best ways of using the team when we have the team together, and what are the best ways of leveraging how we can work individually and then come back together. So for instance, one of the trade-offs of brainstorming is that you might feel judged by doing it out loud in a group, but one of the benefits is it's fun, there's lots of group energy that comes from it, and all of a sudden I begin to know what other people in the group know because they're voicing their ideas out loud, and it builds a mental map in my mind of where different pools of knowledge lie in the group. And in a later project, it might be that suddenly I realize that, you know, Dana or Fabrice have these amazing ideas and I can use them on a subsequent project, but I only knew that because we were brainstorming, right? Whereas if the point of the brainstorm is really to just generate the greatest diversity of ideas as possible, then it would probably be better to have us work independently. We're not going to generate as much positive energy that way because we're not laughing about the crazy things each other are saying. And I might not have as strong of a mental map of what other people know, but now I have the greatest diversity of ideas from which to choose from. And now we can leverage the group to vote on which ideas we want to drill down on. So I think to Marie's point, I think that creativity is a team sport. And what we need to understand better as leaders is how to coach those teams. What plays do we want to run? When do we want to put people in the game? When do we want to pull people out of the game? And how do we manage that flow of energy throughout to get the best results? And part of that is both knowing the team that we're working with and what those people need in their individual trajectories of development, and also knowing what the project needs and then trying to match those two as best we can.
Thank you, Spencer. I'm now turning to Aymeric, and I would be curious to know, how do you leverage the creativity of your team? And maybe if you want to share in hindsight, what could have been or what has been your biggest mistake hindering creativity?
Yeah, so I'll start with the biggest mistake because I think it's the easy part. So as a leader, I think one of the biggest mistakes that hinders the creativity of your team is to think that you have to come up with all the answers. Hopefully that doesn't mean that I'm a jerk, but I don't know, Spencer, you tell me. And I think it's a really common trap for startup founders. It's your baby. You don't want your team to make poor decisions. You have more information than they do usually, so you try to solve everything or have an opinion about everything. But what happens is that when you do that, your team is just in execution mode, and they don't really think about how they would have done it. And even when you have a debate, you realize that they tend to shift their opinion to match your opinion because you are basically the loudest voice in the room. So I've come to realize that, and I've tried to adjust my leadership style to foster more creativity. I think what's been effective is like 4 simple things. The first one is about like goal setting. I try to be like very specific and number driven about the goal. Like, we need to add this many subscribers this month, but then to be very unspecific about the how. Basically, you guys have this objective, go figure out how to do it, and then we'll discuss what you come up with. I think the second thing is to try to lead with open-ended questions as opposed to giving my opinion. How could we do that? Why do you think that's the best option? How do we know that it's the best answer? The third trick is, and I think this one is super important, is to convey the fact that it's okay to fail and to accept that as part of the creative process, and almost celebrate failure as like an opportunity for learning, because I'm really convinced that the best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas, and if you have a lot of ideas, some of them will fail. So the thing is more about like, how do we fail fast? How do you adjust quickly? How do you kill the bad ideas? How do you find out the really good ones, and how do you accelerate on it? Which implies, by the way, that you have to organize also creativity and like as almost a series of tests, track the outcome, and then adjust the hypothesis. And I think the last one is that when I have to give my opinion, I try to always speak last so that I don't influence people and I force them to voice an independent opinion. So that's more like in terms of leadership style. I think there's a lot other techniques that I won't go into details, but that are part of the day-to-day toolkit, which is, processes, rituals. So like things such as, we need to break silos. So we try to have different teams sit with each other, physically, like we are not organized by teams. We are like scattered around the office, so that, you have spontaneous encounters and you generate ideas this way. We organize structured brainstorming sessions once a week, where like one department will bring a problem and everybody will try to solve it with them. And also, that I think one thing that's been really effective is to try to help people in our team experience some of the problems firsthand. So like a very specific example is that we have a team responsible for developing products, creating basically like, in the lab, creating the products that we have. It's super helpful to have them, answer some of the customer complaints about the product, because that gives them a good idea about what the consumer thinks about their product, and how to better develop the next iteration of the products. And it's much more impactful to have to answer to somebody as opposed to reading a chart where we say like X people complain about this feature. But yeah, I think I would agree with something that I think Spencer said, which is, you don't wake up and be creative one morning. It's much more of a iterative process, and it's much more about like the rituals that you put in place. And yeah, I don't believe that there are creative people and non-creative people. I think everybody can be creative in a way. So yeah.
Thank you, Aymeric, for sharing your experience as a leader. Spencer, you wanted to jump in, right?
I did. I wanted to jump in because Aymeric mentioned something that scientifically we've actually spent a bit of time proving over the last 3 years. And it was this idea around leading with questions and how questions can be super powerful. So I just want to try something with all of you. In the chat, I'm posting a question here that maybe some of us are asking ourselves, and this might have been part of the reason why we wanted to come to this sort of masterclass. Now, one of the great things about questions is behaviorally, they're often very attached to our sense of curiosity. And curiosity is often sort of the wellspring of creativity. If we're curious, we explore, we generate more ideas, we ask questions, and then that leads us to have more information that we can recombine in order to be creative. So one of the great practices that can actually encourage both our curiosity and our creativity is what I like to call ask a better question. So let's just try this out here. I posted this question here. And so imagine that I'm a leader and we're kind of like starting off a project and we want to say, okay, how can I better encourage creativity as a leader? What I would want to do is I want to say, okay, I'd like us to ask a better question. So each of you take 30 seconds. We're going to do this now. So in the chat, take this question and ask it in a better way. How can you kind of rephrase it differently? Or, what is the next question that comes to your mind? Or what is an even better question than this? And let's just fill up this chat with better versions of this question and see where it gets us in the next 30 seconds. So let's try it out. Okay, and now you can see what's just happened here is that we have this beautiful flood of ideas. And you can see that some of these ideas are very different. So DDA had, how can I be in a position of listening, right? Like listening is very key to being creative. And Aymeric was talking about like the power of creating spaces where people can listen, whether it's to the customers or whether it's you as a leader listening. We have, Uli saying, how can I support the team that I'm working with to tap into collective creativity? So you can see how these different versions of the question now open up all sorts of different pathways for exploration for us as a group. And one of the things that I would suggest is this is actually one of the best ways of leveraging creativity in a dispersed virtual format like this is look at how we were all of a sudden able to create this sort of explosion of really cool ideas. And all it did was require 30 seconds in a chat window. And it could be that some of the coolest ideas that you have from our time together today would actually come from just cutting and pasting all these questions and just say, which of these questions are questions I want to explore, in the breakout room next, or I want to explore with my fellow alumni via LinkedIn or with my team in the future. So this is a really great practice. If you're thinking about like, what's one thing I could take away from today to jumpstart my team's creativity? It can often be this, let's ask a better question technique. And you just start off with, here's a question, let's reframe this a different way and ask a better question. I often do this with strategic questions as well, right? How can we, what competitors do we have in our environment that we're most nervous about? Question mark. And then ask a better question, and you can generate amazing insights in 30 seconds that can lead to months of different strategic conversations just by doing this sort of a thing. All right, sorry, I appreciate you letting me kind of piggyback on Aymeric's insight there, because I thought it was wonderful. And I just wanted to provide a practice.
And that's actually interesting also for the question I have for you, Fanny, now, because I was going to ask what can actually creative profile bring to the workplace, and also how to ensure they are heard. I felt that the 15 seconds before this flow started was a kind of increasing the nervousness about, is there anything that's going to come up? So I'm glad actually that we asked ourselves those questions just after that exercise, because what does this bring and how do we actually ensure that this is happening? Fanny, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Marie, and thank you, Aymeric and Stuart and Spencer. Sorry for the and I love the exercise, and so that you have us you gave us just right now. So I'm completely passionate, as you are, with creativity, and I don't want to limit it to artists. Indeed, you're right. I'm just going to answer taking the artistic angle, though. We do believe, and I do believe, that creativity is needed now more than ever, but it's needed alongside reason, science, and intuition. So we need all of that. Whenever you just use only one part, it's just heavily biased. It's a belief I have. Why do we need that? And Marie shared a little bit of that in the intro, but it's the competitive advantage of organizations is more and more short-lived. It's driven by the rapid evolution of the technological and business environment, and companies constantly risk stagnation if they and can't stay in the status quo. I also believe that our environment and the problem to be solved in this context are so complex that they must be approached at 360 degrees to avoid blind spots and limit perception bias as much as possible. And everybody here in this room knows that collaborative methods known as human-centric are born from this observation and from the idea that companies could find resources from creative professions to bring out new ideas and perpetuate talents. And here we're not talking about artists, but we're talking, for instance, about designers who are more and more joining organizations to support the creative processes or the innovation processes of those organizations. These human-centric approaches make it possible to imagine other futures, to prepare for them through concrete and richer action. And I think, Spencer, you mentioned in the chat the notion of sprints. So a bunch of those methods are known as the label design thinking approaches or methods. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. My belief is that artists are part of the multidisciplinary profiles to be included in these processes of divergence convergence. They usually have made an assumed choice to develop the famous creative right brain that I killed at the beginning of the masterclass. But they bring a lateral and more sensitive look into complex problem solving. And in this respect, they are great trend setters and innovation captors. And also, the artistic creation process is a process of exploration, which opens room for testing and learning from mistakes, for choosing new ways of development in the face of failure, and for accepting our vulnerability in front of the unknown and recognizing that there are opportunities and there is a space that lie in there. Artistic intervention in businesses have existed for a long time and takes many different forms, more or less transformational for your company. It could be tactical workshops to develop lateral thinking. It could be the famous corporate art collection. It could be residencies of artists, which will produce a creative project that can stay in the company. And there will be also artistic approaches which will be more integrated, and that can lead to the production of collective work between the artist and an employee group or a collective, which will also ensure that there is methodological learning for the organization. There has been many successes with artistic intervention in business. It's also got its share of challenges that needs to be anticipated in order to guarantee the achievement of the desired results that you're looking for. It's the same as any form of diversity and inclusion type of stuff, right? You need to work on it to make it happen. And a couple of insights based on experience is that, first of all, you need to accept not knowing the value created or expected in advance, because, you know, there's a big part of unknown when you have artistic intervention in a business. It's still important to frame the scope of the intervention and the desired artistic and organizational deliverables, knowing again that it's a framing of concept, and precisely the work that will be done between the artist and the organization is not known at the moment, usually when you contract. And then the last challenge, as with, again, any other form of diversity, is to succeed or ensure that you succeed in integrating the artist into the collective. And that's anything but obvious. That requires mediation, facilitation, methods, respect, and the artist actually, or the creative profiles, if you want to go broader than the artist, will help you in that with their faculty of observation and the experience of the creative process that they're very familiar with. And from personal experience, if you go beyond the artist, it's quite challenging to bring in diverse profiles or more creative profiles in a divergent conversion process. It requires facilitation and mediation, and it requires attention and resources. But the outcome of bringing, of expanding, how you're looking at a complex problem will be enormous and disruptive versus, trying to solve the same complex issue just with a team that will reinforce your bias. So thank you, Mai.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I think it's time to head up for some breakouts to discuss a little more in depth those topics. Thank you for the inspiring thoughts. And Juliana will send you to some of the breakouts. Please accept the breakouts, and we'll regroup after for some closing remarks. Yes, I'm
okay.
I'm back.
There are so many. So maybe I hope you all had a good conversation. Maybe you just close the session, Marie, with our roti.
So thank you all. We had I was in a session very productive. I guess the others were too. We just wanted to regroup, to close that session on creativity and have your feedback on how it went. So we'll do what we call a roti. So the idea is that you just share with your hand and give us a number on how useful and how you like this session. And I will, Fanny, maybe if you, because I don't see a lot of people with that. If I put my screen like that,
I think you need to remove the slide, and then we can all see each other.
Okay.
And just you
so
give us
stop
a hand,
sharing, then we can see each other. That would be easier. So please, what's your feedback?
Give us a hand. Okay. 4, 5. Cool. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you.
The next one will be, just a closing word, the next one will be on February the 10th, and it's going to be on super teaming, and we will pick some of the comments that were shared by Spencer and Aymeric in particular. And we will have two great speakers as well. So stay tuned, and we hope to see you then.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.